So I'll do whatever you want. I'll always do whatever you want. That is my policy.
Thank you very much.
Okay, people, we're going to talk about halachot pertaining to free time, thanking Ezra for asking an excellent question last week. And I have to say, I think free time is probably one of the most important topics to talk about, because when we're studying in yeshiva, so it's very clear, we may not always have the motivation or the energy to sit in the Beit Midrash, but when it's Beit Midrash time, I know what the right thing to do is, and I know what the wrong thing to do is. On Shabbat, I know meal times, I know davening times, I know what the right thing to do is, I know what the wrong thing to do is. But then I've had a really long week, and then it's Saturday night, and I just want to, I don't know, chill. That's when I need to have, that's the time that I need some guidelines. That's dafka the time when it'll be so useful to know what's the right thing to do. Also, tonight, you holy people have been sitting, steiging in a Beit Midrash, hour after hour. Our shir, sadly, will come to an end at some point this evening. And then at the end of the shiur, you're all going to go upstairs, free time. What are you going to do? What's the appropriate? What's healthy? What do religious, good people, what do they do in their free time? I think that is such an important question. And obviously we're not going to answer the question by saying do this or do that. But we're going to give some guidelines. How does halakha regard different activities? Which activities does halakha say that's good? And which activities does halakha say not so good? Not because we do those activities nowadays, but those parameters will give us an idea of what's good and what's not so good. You know, what's the best thing to do and what's not as good. Okay, we're going to start with source number one. Source number one is actually in English and Hebrew. It's the words. Now, I don't have my glasses today, so you're going to have to correct. If I make mistakes, I'll be very grateful if somebody corrects me. This is the words of Rabbi Eli, and he said, B'shlosha devarim adam nikar. There are three ways to get to know a person. The character. Koso is drink, meaning when they talk about drink, in those days there wasn't Coke. There was water or wine. So koso, you know, how much wine do they drink? Or more, when they drink wine, what are they like? Koso, kiso. Kiso is their money. How do they use their money? How do they invest? What's important and they spend their money on? What's less important? And the last one is ka'aso. Ka'aso, what are they like when they're angry? What sort of person are they? Koso, kiso, ka'aso. Those three things are very good indicators of what somebody was like. But then, Amri, the rabbis added a fourth one to the list of Rabbi Eli, and they said, sochko. Do you see that? Kiso, ka'aso, koso, sachako. Like similar sort of, what's the word in English? When they're all similar words.
An automatopoeia?
No, not that.
No,
Word
that's
family.
It's iteration. Is that the word?
I don't know.
If they all sound the same, that's alliteration.
Thank you. That's what I'm looking for. The fourth one is sochko, and that is, how do they spend their free time? That is such a great way to know what somebody is like. When I've got a day, what am I going to do with my day? When I've got an evening, what am I excited for? What am I going to do when I've got a bit of free time? That is the fourth way that I invest. The fourth way to see what somebody is like. So therefore, we want to know what are the appropriate things to do. So our discussion is divided into three sections. The first section is we're going to talk about things that aren't so good. That's the first section. Then afterwards, we're going to talk about perhaps the right thing to do. And we're going to talk about the right thing to do in three sections. The first section about the right thing to do is from the Nodab Yudah, that is from the 18th century, then from the 20th century, and then right to now, to the 21st century, talking about modern day activities. But let's first start talking about what should I avoid? What are the places I should not go in my free time? Okay, so this is it. It's actually the very first verse in the book of Tehillim. The very first verse in the book of Tehillim says, Ashrei ha'ish, praise be the person, asher lo halach ba'atzat rushaim, who doesn't go follow atzat rushaim.
Evil men.
Yeah, the counsel of not great people. That's such a rubbish translation. Yeah, but avoids not good people. Uvaderech hata'im lo amad, and he doesn't stand with sinners. Now this is very interesting. Moshav leitzim. Moshav leitzim is moshav is to sit down, like a yeshiva, like people of just lazy. It just doesn't hang around with lazy people. Doesn't sort of just sit down and just, I don't know what the word is.
Leitzim is like
Leitzim, yeah, lazy people.
oh really?
A late son in modern Hebrew is a lazy person.
Okay.
Late Sim is lazy.
Uh,
Late Sim is lazy.
Yeah, atzlan. Atzlan is lazy.
Aslan.
Atzlanim.
So what do you?
Yes.
What do you not do with lazy people?
Avoid that. That's not the sort of community that I'm going to spend my time with. People that are not being productive. Rather,
It calls them, it says here in the Quran, it calls them nor sits in the seat of scorners.
yeah,
It calls them scorners.
scorners. Excellent, thank you. Rather, b'Torat Hashem cheftzah, I will immerse myself in God's Torah. Over Torato yekeh yomam v'layla, and I will immerse myself in Torah day and night. Okay, now the Gemara wants to understand who these leitzim are. What's the activities that they do that I should avoid? Now, nowadays, the activities could be entirely different. But it gives us a guideline. The Gemara in Avodah Zarah talks about what a moshav leitzim is. So this is really what not to do. It's just hang out with the wrong people. Now, they're not being productive, they're not doing something. Rest is such a useful, gift. And if you use it well, it can enhance your life manyfold. But if you don't utilize it well, it can destroy, or at least harm to some extent, all the great things that you may have achieved prior to that. You have an amazing, amazing day in yeshiva, and then you don't utilize the end of the day well, and then you sort of
You take a step back.
yeah, take a bit from the great thing that you did today. But if you find a good way to unwind at the end of the day, then you're really just enhancing what was already a very useful and productive day. That's why it's really important to know what the right thing is. Now, and what's the wrong thing is moshav leitzim. So the Gemara tells us what is a moshav leitzim. This is in the third source. Tanu Rabbanan haolech listadion to stadiums. For karakum. Karakum is probably like a circus. Although, well, okay. For ra'asham et hanachashim, he looks at wild animals. Rashi says on the words istadion makom shemenagchin et ashor. Now the stadiums, this is in the Rome, is a place going to like a, what do they call them? A bull. What do they do in Spain? Bullfights.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think originally the stadiums, these big stadiums, were where the people in Rome would get, and they weren't watching football, they were watching bullfights. So the stadium is a place where people would go to watch a bullfight. It's just not an appropriate thing to be doing, appropriate place to be watching. And then the circus is a place where people are just fooling around. Late sanut is fooling around. Just not. It's not having a laugh.
Fights?
Huh?
During the Roman period, what about gladiator fights?
Mm-hmm. Likewise, that sort of those sorts of activities. Now, obviously, we don't have gladiators, and we also don't have.
Yeah, we got
Mixed martial arts.
Yeah.
Ah, really?
You have mixed
Boxing.
But there
Yeah, you have, there's
Boxing.
but there's
combat
still
sports.
fighting.
Let's say combat
You
sports.
could also
combat
say
sports.
football.
Let's not combat sports. Okay, but combat
It goes
sports.
in the same direction.
So we will look when we go into modern day sources how this Talmudic source is applied to modern day activities. Because on the one hand, see, it's a very, very important line that we're drawing over here. If you end up being too strict, then the result is people will do it because we're human beings and we need to wind down. So you can't be too strict and say this is forbidden, that is forbidden, everything is forbidden. The only thing that you're permitted to do is to sit and learn. Then you're going to find ways of relaxing that are not good. So therefore, it's much better to limit as much as possible and say, no, it's this particular activity that is bad. Or, there's certain area of behavior that we want to avoid. And if you're able to leave room open for healthy, wholesome, recreational activities, then you're allowing people to find a healthy and suitable outlet for their, for winding down at the end of the day. If you say to a guy in yeshiva that at the end of the day, the only thing you can do when you close your Gemara is go straight to sleep and there's no other activity, so you might be able to do that for a day or 2 or 5 days, a week, 2 weeks. But guys need, especially people who are entering the world of Torah, you need to find activities. And therefore, when the Gemara speaks, we shouldn't look to expand as wide as possible. The Gemara talks about leitzanut, which is fooling around, and talks about bullfights. So you shouldn't say that all comedy and all contact sports are forbidden, because then you would force people to find activities that were not sanctioned by halakha. You follow? And therefore you have to understand what particularly is wrong. And then once I understand what particularly is wrong, I can then end up finding my way to healthy, wholesome recreation. That makes sense? Do you buy that? Okay, I want to add one thing to this little piece of Gemara, which I heard from I heard it from, in the name of Rabbi Yisrael Misalant, who wrote Or Yisrael, but I heard it from a teacher of mine here in Yerushalayim. His name is Rav Dani Rabin. He says something very beautiful. He spoke in a different context. He spoke about whether you should wear a kippah or not wear a kippah. And apparently at the time of Rabbi Yisrael Misalant, there were some Jews that felt it was very important to wear a kippah, and other Jews, even though they were committed to Torah, they chose not to wear kippot. And the truth is, we could discuss this one week, the halachic requirement for wearing a kippah is not mentioned in the Torah. It is mentioned in the Talmud, but in certain contexts. It's become far more important. It's become far more important than the halachic requirement would make it be. As opposed to, let's say, we mentioned Birkat Hamazon earlier, which is mentioned in the Torah, which is, it's a mitzvah d'oraita to bench after a meal. The kippah is certainly not the same level of requirement, and yet it has become so. It has become a very important sign of religious affiliation. So Rabbi Yisrael Misalant used to say, I wouldn't say, this is him, Rabbi Yisrael Misalant, I wouldn't say that if you don't wear a kippah, you're a non-Jew. But I would say that non-Jews don't wear kippot. Isn't that lovely? Do you know what he means? Meaning I'm choosing where I want to identify myself. You don't become a non-Jew by not wearing a kippah. But who are the people in the world that don't wear kippot? They are the non-Jews. You have chosen...
Muslims wear a skull cap.
Fine, great. That's okay.
Not all.
No, but like
It
it's still.
depends.
But by taking it off, I'm choosing not to identify. You follow? So by extension, you could say, I'm not a non-Jew if I go to a bar, but the non-Jews are the ones that go there. You follow the same sort, like their activities. When I choose to go to an activity, I don't become that person, but those are the people that do that sort of activity. You follow? Does that make sense? Shalom Aleichem. I found that very, very helpful, that when I choose my activities, I am choosing to identify within a particular community. And therefore, I should be careful in choosing my recreation, because my recreational choices are an indication of where I see myself.
Interesting that you say that. I don't know if this was necessarily true, but they said in New York, at least, there are Orthodox Jews that go to the opera and go to the theater.
Right.
And in certain communities, when big name rabbis go see a show at the opera, at the Met, they get some backlash from their community. They're like, "What are you doing? You're going amongst the non-Jews to go see an opera. Like, why are you doing that? You're amongst the goyim." And it's interesting because, like, had you not been reading this free time halacha, you would think, oh, he's just doing it on his free time. He's just going to see an opera.
Yeah, so
When my brother was here in Israel, the first Deadpool movie had come out, and he told me that he went to see it with some friends, but he remembers noticed a significant amount of what appeared to him ultra Orthodox Jews, and and he realized it's obviously they're not from they went to like a couple neighborhoods over to watch the movie, but they still wanted to see the movie.
yeah. I make a step. The way that I choose to spend my time, it says something. Who are the other people that do this activity? Which is a useful indication for me to decide, is this a worthwhile activity or not? Like, with whom am I associating when I choose to take part in this activity? Now, this idea that we see in the Gemara, we see even stronger in source number 5, which is a question asked to the Nodab Yehuda. It's absolutely brilliant. Let me just give you some context for source number 5. Source number 5 is a question asked to the Nodab Yehuda. The Nodab Yehuda was Rav Yecheskel Landau, the chief rabbi of Prague in the 18th century. The 18th century, as you know, was the beginning of emancipation. And he was, the Nodab Yehuda, really the rabbinic authority in Europe.
Century?
18th century, 1700s.
Okay.
And he was the rabbinic authority in Europe at the time, who responded to questions that had never been asked before. Like,
Can a Jew go hunting?
That is our question. Can a Jew go hunting?
Yeah,
Exactly
I
this one over
remember this question. He said you can't go hunting for sport because I'm pretty sure it's like danger to the animal.
Oh, so we're going to come to that. But he had many questions like a Jewish landowner. There were never Jewish landowners in the Middle Ages. This was only something that would happen in, after when the Jews were integrated into general society. Working on Shabbat, having a non-Jew work for me on Shabbat. All these sorts of new questions, modern questions of a Jew integrated into a wider society. So this Juva that we're going to look at, source number 5, mentioned by Ezra over here, was a Jew who was asked by the Nodab Yehuda was asked by this Jew that he has been invited to go hunting with some friends. A question that would never have been asked 100 years earlier. Jews integrated into a general society, being part of this social circle. But is hunting something that Jews should do or not? And the Nodab Yehuda's answer is fascinating. He says, no, you're not allowed to go hunting. But you know why you're not allowed to go hunting? Now, I don't want to get too caught up in this question because it's not our question for today. We're only using this as an example. But he says...
But this is like what you think people do on their free time back in the days. Just go hunting for free.
Exactly. This was a free time activity. Now, it's not a problem of tsar ba'alei chaim, causing pain to animals. Why? Because causing pain to an animal is causing pointless pain to an animal. But if I'm hunting, if I'm doing it for my pleasure, when I kill an animal in order to eat it, make my chicken soup, or I eat a steak, that's not tsar ba'alei chaim because I'm doing it for benefit. Likewise, if I'm killing the animal for benefit, it's not tsar ba'alei chaim. What makes it tsar ba'alei chaim is when you cause pain to an animal for no reason. That's wrong. Or you see an animal in pain and you can alleviate the pain. But if you're doing it for a reason, it's not a problem of tsar ba'alei chaim. Nevertheless, it's forbidden. Why is it forbidden to go hunting? Because, says the Nodab Yehuda, who are the hunters that we read about in the Torah? Do you know who that? Esav.
Very
Esav.
bad people.
Nimrod. Excellent. I mean, Nimrod in the Midrash, but Esav mentioned in the text itself.
And so
Yodea
hunting
Tzayid
leads to-
Ish Sadeh. So, yes.
Is it that the fear that hunting might lead to off the derech or something? And so he just wants you to go hunting because of that reason?
No, he's saying that if I choose to go hunting, I'm choosing to identify myself as somebody who enjoys doing activities like Esav. So I'm not Esav, but I'm doing the sort of stuff that Esav would do. A little bit like what we saw in Rabbi Yisrael Misalant. If I go hunting, does that make me Esav? No, it doesn't. But Esav is a guy who goes hunting. You follow? And therefore I'm choosing to identify myself as part of a group of people of which Esav is a part. You follow? And that's the problem. Now that's a very, very helpful. We saw it in the Gemara. We see it again now in the Noda B'Yoda. And I think it's such a useful guideline for ourselves. Is it appropriate or is it not appropriate? Who are the other people who engage in this activity? With whom am I identifying by taking part in this activity? You follow? And if I'm identifying with good people, I go for a hike in Eretz Israel, I'm identifying with people who love this beautiful country. If I go gambling on some slot machines, so I'm identifying with a different group of people. You follow? With whom am I identifying when I'm spending my free time? You hear that? Joy, happiness. Okay, we can move on now. We spoke about earlier generations. We're now going to go to modern times. Okay.
So modern leisure activity.
Right. Okay. We're actually going to miss out. We're going to go to source number 7 now. Now, source number 7 is very, very interesting. The Shulchan Aruch. Oh, Yaakov, you are such a gift.
A slightly tangential question, but not really.
That's right, we do tangential here.
What does Torah say in regards to spending free time? Or I also say this, that, free time is also like dedicating your time as well. Like, your free time. What does Torah say about free time / dedicating your time to working out? As in like physical activity for like self-improvement.
I think that's very important. It's very important to be healthy. We were talking about this earlier. You mean sport? Going for a swim?
I mean, like, let's say going to the gym to work out, lift weights, not necessarily for like the competition purpose, but just for your own health reason. Yeah, health reason, sure.
So the truth is, about 2 years ago, they have a marathon here in Jerusalem.
Mm-hmm. They had it recently.
Every year, yeah. It's normally in March, and
March.
It's normally in March time. That is Adar, right around Purim time.
I think they're going to have another one in March.
Anyway, so a couple of years ago, it's normally on a Friday. That Friday night, the Friday night after the marathon, I was walking to shul, and there was a guy walking to shul, and he was wearing his medal that he got that morning. And somebody came over to him and said, Anu ratzim, v'heim ratzim. Now, we say when we make a siyum, when we complete a book of Jewish law, there is a text that we say. And in that text, we say, we run to the Beit Midrash, and they run for no reason. Meaning,
this is Masechet Brachot.
It's the end of every Masechet. Whenever you finish a Masechet, we run, and we're running towards the Beit Midrash, but those people, meaning those people not engaged in Torah, they run, but they're just running Liv'er Shachat, just towards destruction, for no particular purpose.
This is what a Rebbe said, and it's recorded in Bracha, what he said.
Ah.
Yeah, he would always say something before he goes in, and then he'd say something before he goes out.
Yes, excellent, very good.
That he should give his portions to the ones that learn in the Beit Midrash, not the ones that busy their time in whateverness.
Yes, so this would seem to indicate, Yaakov, that working out was not such a great idea, Machon?
Potentially.
But another guy walking to shul, but there we're blessed with so many Talmidei Chachamim that it was beautiful, responded with a verse and said, Kovei Hashem yachalifu koach. Those people that desire God need to re-energize. And he said, no, they're not. It depends what's the purpose? If I'm running in order to have energy, in order to be able to function in my Torah learning, then that's excellent. But if I'm running for running, but not, then that's less useful. It really depends a little bit on what's the goal. You understand?
Sure.
Isn't there a pasuk that says in the Torah, it's either in the Torah or in the Gemara, it says something about you should have a healthy mind and a healthy body.
Yes, the Rambam speaks about how being a very healthy person. Hillel HaZaken the Gemara tells us about the Gemara tells us about a bath. He once went to have a bath and he's told his students, I'm on my way to do a very big mitzvah, I can't talk to you now. He ran off at the end of the shiur. The students followed him. What mitzvah is the rabbi about to perform? And he had a bath. And then the students came over to him afterwards and said, that wasn't, that was the mitzvah. And he said, of course it's a mitzvah, because I'm created in God's image. And therefore I am preserving this image of God, that is me. So if that's what I'm doing, then that's a very good, healthy, valuable activity. And I only want to sort of promote that as much as possible. Does that make sense? So I suppose that answers the question to some extent. They're really very much in exercise, depends what the goal is. If the goal is, my interest is health in order that I should be able to do what I need to do, that's great. But if it's just in order to look better on the pictures, that's probably that's probably less useful.
So what do you say, Rabbi, when you have the opposite extreme, which is you have guys who are learning all day long, and then their outlet is, at least what we see in Meir Sharim quite frequently, their outlet is smoking. They smoke cigarettes and they smoke and they vape and they
Really?
Okay, so the truth is we don't need to go into examples of what different people do, but I will just say to respond to you and say that's why I'm not sure if the word is outlet, but you do need in order to be a wholesome, complete person, since you're not exclusively a mind, you do need to find a way to relax in a healthy, useful, beneficial way for yourself. And therefore, if we say everything is forbidden, then people will find an outlet which isn't good. I know there's a yeshiva somewhere here in Jerusalem, I can't remember which one it is, where the head of the yeshiva is very, very particular that the boys play football every Friday. There's like 18-year-olds, they need to, because if they don't run around once a week, then something else, then that energy will come out somewhere else.
I like that because it promotes teamwork and all that stuff.
It's good, but you can't only invest all of your time in Torah study. In fact, I'm only doing these things in order to ensure that my Torah study is as effective as possible. And perhaps this is the most dangerous thing, because I could have the most amazing day in yeshiva, and then I could end my day, go up to my room, and God forbid, I don't know, not utilize those minutes of free time well, and then to some extent, I don't know, not best end what was a very good day. And therefore it's very good to find the healthy outlet, which brings us so conveniently to our next source. Source number 7 is the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch in the laws of Shabbat, talking about what activities are permitted and forbidden on Shabbat. What are you allowed to do? Well, you're not allowed to do. Now, you would say, maybe I should spend the whole of my Shabbat day in prayer and eating my Shabbat food. But, even in the middle of the winter, there's still a couple of hours that are not eating and are not davening and not sleeping. And not everyone is a Yaakov. And even Yaakov probably couldn't do it every week, where Shabbat is just intellectual bliss of just delving into books. It's good, but Be'ezrat Hashem, when you build a family, then you have to find what's a healthy thing to do. So the Shulchan Aruch says over here, Mutar, it is permitted, L'sachek ba'atzamot, to play this game. Now, it's called Ashich. Maybe it's chess. Afal pi,
when is this? What was this
Shemashmiim Kol, it probably isn't chess. Hoil ve'enu mitkaven lashir. It's talking about various games. Talking about, are you allowed to... Shulchan Aruch was written in the 1600s.
Yeah, it's probably
I was
chess.
thinking it could have been Ur, but that would have been during the Babylonian Talmud.
No. We're much more recent.
People
We
have
are
been playing chess for 1,000 years.
Yes, exactly. Now he talks about playing this b'schok ba'alma, just have a good time. Aval kadei laharviach asur. Now it's interesting. The Shulchan Aruch mentions that it is permitted and perhaps even a good idea to schok ba'alma. Schok is literally in modern is like the word yitzchak, to laugh, to relax, to chill. It is permitted, the Shulchan Aruch permitted, for families, even recommended to spend some time just chilling together as a family, playing a card game. You're not playing poker in order to make money, but you're just enjoying family time together is a very productive thing to do. The Mishnah Berurah goes even further. V'noagin la'asotam shel kesef shiyu miyuchadim l'Shabbat. He says this game that they would play, maybe it's chess, maybe it's not chess. They would even have a special board for the chess that they would bring out on Shabbat. They'd have games that were almost made in honor of Shabbat. So I would be relaxing on Shabbat. My celebration of Shabbat was by bringing out games that are specially out there for Shabbat. That is from the Shulchan Aruch and then from the Mishnah Berurah. Now I like that very, very much, and I think it's very, very true, especially nowadays where we live so much of our lives with, where you're sort of so distracted by so many things going on all the time. On Shabbat, all these distractions disappear. You can focus on family, and you're allowed to have a productive, good time together as a family. Okay, that is the Shulchan Aruch. Joy, happiness. Now, what's interesting about the Shulchan Aruch, as opposed to all the other sources that we read until now, we've been talking about this is bad. Don't do this, don't do that. Nachon, Moshav Leitzim is not a good idea. Going to a bullfight is not a good idea. Going hunting is not a good idea. We were talking about things that we should be avoiding, and now we're talking about schok as something which is good. Schok, which is, having a relaxing time together with other people is a productive and healthy way to spend your time. Okay. Now, that's from the Shulchan Aruch Mishnah Berurah. The commentary of the Mishnah Berurah talks about people that would have these games that were elaborate, sort of better quality, and they would be part of my Onik Shabbat to take out these games on Shabbat. Moving from the Mishnah Berurah, we go to the 20th century to Rav Ovadia Yosef in 2 Tshuvot. The first one, in source number 9, he talks about, it's really based on the Gemara that we saw earlier. Are you allowed to go to a bullfight? This was a question asked in the 20th century. I just want to tell you the background to this question. It's very interesting. Rav Ovadia Yosef has a beautiful book of Tshuvot. I don't think it's not in this particular room, but it's in lots of Jewish rooms around the world. And it's called Yechavedat. That's the name of the book. It's 6 volumes, Yechavedat. And Rav Ovadia Yosef, used to have a radio show. And people would call, he was the chief rabbi of Israel, as you know. People would call him and ask him halachic questions. And Rav Ovadia Yosef would answer the questions off the cuff. Now, what makes this book particularly popular is because he was answering the questions off the cuff. This means that they were less heavy and less detailed. I mean, it's incredible how much Torah he had available off the cuff just to bring out, which is just remarkable. But it means that a topic that wouldn't be a 20-page answer, it would be a 2-page answer. So people that could ask a question, and I'm interested, but I'm not going to be sort of writing a doctorate on it. I just want to know the halakha. So the book became a very popular choice for people that wanted to know his halachic opinions without investing hours and hours in reading through his scholarly analysis of the situation. So people asked him, are you allowed to go to a bullfight? Now we know already, because we saw the Gemara in Avodah Zarah earlier that told us that you're not allowed to. That is a Moshav Leitzim. And we learned that from Moshela that Moshav Leitzim is a community of scoffers, scorners. Like people that aren't serious. There's a difference between relaxing and having a laugh, and like a scorning is like to take away sincerity, is to take away genuineness. That's really like it can really harm real things when you scorn and when you mock. Now he was asked about the bullfight and he said no. But he said what he thinks you should do. However, he says, I do think that it is permissible to go to a zoo. What happens when you go to the zoo? You look at, a zoo is, have you ever seen a zoo?
I've been to the zoo here.
The zoo here is, when our kids were, you should go to the zoo here. Just like go. If you've got time.
Just going to see the animals, that's it.
Yeah, that is what the zoo is. You're such an entertaining person. That is exactly what the zoo is. But when you look at the animals, they're so varied and they're so interesting in how they work, how they move. You can use the experience of observing a zoo and just be blown away by the majesty, the variety of creation. What an amazing world we live in today. And Rav Ovadia would say there's a big difference between a bullfight on the one hand and a zoo on the other hand. Now those are not the only two outdoor activities, but I would like to suggest that you should take them as a paradigm. What's a bullfight? It brings out cruelty, revenge, bloodthirsty, looking for some violence. That's really not a healthy emotion. Also, who are the people that are attracted to go to a bullfight? They're not always the creme de la creme of society. But then take the other side of the paradigm, and that is a zoo. Especially here in Jerusalem, such a wide variety of people, so fascinated to go to the zoo. I'm not embarrassed to be seen in the zoo. So I know there are outdoor activities other than a zoo or a bullfight. But if you're thinking, is this good or bad? Think, is this a bit more like a zoo or is this more like a bullfight? And then by looking at your activity, then you'll come to some idea of whether it's a good or not such good activity to do. Yes?
Again, slightly tangential, but relevant.
We love tangential.
On the spectrum of going to the, so I see the zoo as something that it's a very educational experience. Assuming you go there with a family as well, whether it's for yourself or anything, versus taking a kid to a zoo bullfight. It's what's that teaching them anything? But what about teaching your children in your free time, combat sports? Whether it be for example, Krav Maga, let's use it as an example, where it's not something where you're lusting for hurt, but whether it's something you're teaching them to protect, but obviously it is in violence kind of scope.
I think that's not a problem because it's not the pleasure isn't in the violence.
Mm-hmm.
They're learning a skill. That is a good thing.
Even though the skill is how to be violent, though.
It's how to protect yourself.
Okay, sure.
No, I think that's not such a
violence.
Sure. Okay, all right.
If you're teaching a kid Krav Maga, you're teaching him self-defense and
I'm just making sure that's fine.
Yeah, there's so many different. It's so interesting. In preparing for this shir, I did a Google search for the 15 most popular leisure activities, just to see what different things would come up, and I didn't find a list of the 15 most popular activities, but I read there was lists of the 15 most wholesome activities, like learning an instrument, reading a book, writing a journal, developing a hobby. When you got spare time, there's so much
Stuff you can do.
there's so much opportunity to unwind and also use that moment to do something. I know for our kids at home, like they like to run around, little kids, even the big kids like to quite a bit. So you can't tell kids, a bit like the guy that plays football, you can't tell them if you can't say everything is forbidden. As soon as you forbid everything, then they'll find the wrong thing to do. So we got a table tennis table about a year and a half ago. It was one of the best things we got. It's such a fantastic way. After a long day, the kids want to unwind. It's such a productive, interesting skill. I mean, it's not exciting to beat someone at table tennis, but it's innocent, it's energetic, it burns some calories, helps you, sort of like unwind at the end of the day. That's such a more active way to utilize your free time. And then at the end of, playing for 20 minutes, you sit down so content. As opposed to you come home and then you pick up your phone and you're on some random, watching something. You could watch for 40 minutes and not seen anything of any interest. You know what I mean? There's so many ways that I could come to these moments in a non-useful way. So you can't be too strict, because then you'll sort of, people will find an outlet elsewhere. But on the other hand, you should have some sort of boundaries, because without boundaries, you can end up wasting time. A skill, like learning a skill, can be such a refreshing and exciting activity. Well, learn how to juggle or whatever. Everybody will find something that is exciting for them. Okay, that was an excellent question.
Okay.
It's very good because we're going to end in a minute, and then when we end, everyone will decide what to do. Okay, is everything clear until now? Any questions until this point? Okay, I want to talk about one last thing, but I sort of saved it till last because I think it's so controversial. It's such a difficult question, and that is like watching films, watching TV, YouTube, all that sort of stuff. What should be the Jewish approach to Netflix or binge watching? I'm sure that these aren't
turn on all
terms.
the safeties of no violence,
Well,
no
here's
unsneeze content.
Here's the thing. I think like the Rob said, YouTube for an example. YouTube is so general. You could be sitting on YouTube watching some guy play a video game, or you could be watching a shiur on YouTube, and that's how I got started. I was watching shiurim on YouTube. So
This shears on YouTube, is that right? That's a bit ironic. Sorry.
I would implore you.
Stay here. Don't go to any of the other stuff on the side.
I would implore you, Rob, to not just say watching YouTube. And listen, Netflix has documentaries, and they have historical documentaries that talk about archaeology that's happening here in Israel. I'm sure you would consider that to be a valuable.
So the truth is, I did actually forget that we're recording this year, and brings a certain irony into our discussion.
So I would implore the Rav to specify what type of content.
Excellent. The truth is, you have articulated so beautifully the source that we're going to look in number 11. It's so good. It's in English. But before we get, I shouldn't have said that. Now everyone's going to read 11. But don't go there quite yet. Let's go to number 10. This is still Rav Ovadia Yosef.
What's a DVD?
No. I was thinking of updating it. Yeah, you can see it's not written that recently.
I need NFTs now.
Okay. He says, Da. Rav Ovadia, Da. Shekol mashkada b'zeh hu b'ro'eh בטלוויזיה בדרך מקרה. אבל אם נכנס הטלוויזיה בבית, הוא אסור גמור לכל מי שמודה על האמת. He, Rav Ovadia Yosef, was very much against a television. Now, obviously, he had a television. He's talking about a television. Nowadays, it's not, people don't watch a television. People watch on so many other things. I don't even know what many of the platforms that people watch nowadays on, but he feels, and I hear what he's saying. He says that it's about when you're watching a film. I'm not talking about documentaries, but when you're watching a film, especially an American film, you're being sold, whether you notice or you don't notice, you're being sold a culture, very, very much a culture that we live, that's very prevalent in the world around us. And he, Rav Ovadia Yosef, don't forget, he lives here in Israel, so he was, to some extent, cut off from this very strong Western influence. And I imagine also imploring his students to protect themselves too, saw it as his responsibility. And here in Israel, his students are here, there was some chance of success, to keep them away from there. But he felt that there's so much that could go wrong. There's so much in it that could sell you a lifestyle or a culture or a world which is contrary to Torah values, that he felt that it would be appropriate not to have a television. Now, in the olden days, the big question was, before internet, a world that you don't know about people, but the question was, do you have a television or do you not have a television? Because if you got a television, then you could watch films, but if you didn't have a television, then you couldn't watch, you could only listen to the radio. There was no other...
You could go to movie theaters.
Okay, that's true, but I mean on a day-to-day basis, you couldn't...
Before radios became... Before televisions existed, if you go back to the 1920s and 1930s, especially where I'm from in Dallas, people would go to movie theaters, mamash, 3 or 4 times a week because the only air-conditioned places in town would be movie theaters. I'm serious. I hear these stories from my grandfather. People would go to the movie theater 3 or 4 times a week because they costed nothing, a nickel, and even back then a nickel was very, very little.
Right.
You're talking about the Great Depression?
I'm talking about the Great Depression before and even into the 1940s. People would go to the movie theaters 3 or 4 times a week. It was a thing to do in your time. It was very cheap, and there was air conditioning.
Oh, okay, well it's interesting. But in our discussion, we're really more. Let's focus perhaps on today. So Rav Ovadia is clearly.
I wanted to point out, I did research on this while you were talking. It says men spend 5.5 hours a day on leisure activities, and women spend 4 hours a day on leisure activities, and half of this time is usually spent watching TV.
Really? 2 hours a day?
For men, it's 3 hours, and for women,
oh my gosh, that is interesting. Excellent. Okay.
This is 2021. So.
Fascinating. That's interesting. Thank you for that. So I could only find, maybe I'm very happy I couldn't find that. I could only find sort of wholesome activities. Maybe I wasn't Googling it right. Okay. Rav Ovadia is very much against television, but I think what is a more useful is there's a wonderful, wonderful rabbi. His name is Rav Daniel Mann. He writes a column actually in the Torah Tidbits, which is somewhere around here, and he's a Dayan, a Jewish judge in Eretz Chemda here in Jerusalem, and he talks about a medium. He says it's much less about the medium, meaning am I using YouTube, and this is really am I using Netflix or am I using whatever other things people use to watch with. It's not about the medium. You can't have YouTube can't be good and Netflix can't be bad, but it all depends on the content. The question is, what am I doing it for? Am I watching things? Now, the things to avoid are obviously immodesty, and that limits us to some extent in what we're allowed to watch and what we're not allowed to watch. But also, and I think this is quite important, also language. I mean, if it's not suitable for kids, it's probably not suitable for religious men either. Religious people either. I mean, it's not like the stuff that an adult can see, but a child can't see. If it's not suitable for a child to see, it's probably not suitable for any of us to see it either, and therefore it's useful to avoid it. But he adds another thing, and I think this is very important, and it connects back to the Moshav Leitzim that we saw earlier. And I think this would not apply to our documentary. So he's against, obviously, immodesty. That's not a chidush. For us, we understand that. He's also against bad language. Now, you might have thought... Yeah, exactly. Now, you might have thought that's, I can, when it comes to looking at things that are inappropriate, I can understand that. But I think it's important to realize that the language that we hear also has an impact on the way that we speak. And if there's bad language, that is damaging just as immodesty is. And then the third thing, and I thought this was really excellent, and this links us really back to the beginning of what we were saying, the third thing that he thinks is inappropriate, and that is mockery. Mockery. If you watch something, it could be perfectly modest, it could be perfectly good language, but it's mockery. That is moshav leitzim. What's your word? Moshav leitzim. People who are
Scorners.
Scorners, exactly. Now there, because I'm taking away genuineness from my life. You hear? So here's 3 red lines are modesty, language, and mockery. If any of those 3 things find themselves in whatever it is that I'm watching, then that's probably something that I shouldn't be watching, and I find that to be a very helpful guideline for me. I think nowadays it is very difficult, especially here, people who have grown up watching. It'll be very hard to say that, that's it, no more. But I think we do have to find guidelines that can be helpful for us to avoid things that are immodest, avoid things that have got bad language, and avoid things that include mockery as well. Okay, with that we conclude the words of Rabbi Mann. Do we have any questions before I summarize? Yes.
It's difficult because with mockery you basically can't watch any satire films. Like there's a whole genre of film that's completely out now.
No, I think Moshav Leitzim is
most comedy.
Is it more like a Lashon Hara? Like you can't watch something that's Lashon Hara.
Yeah, I think that. Yeah, satire works. Irony, that works. I think that, I suppose, what might be a helpful way to know if it's good or not so good? Who are the people that find it funny? You know what I mean? A bit like what we were saying right at the beginning. When I choose an activity,
finds it funny?
No, but who are they aiming at? Who are the audience? If the audience are good people, just people then that's probably not going to be a problem. But if the audience are, they're trying to get to stir trouble, if there's an agenda, if they're trying to push something, then that could be more of a problem. I think that the difference might be a bit like what we were saying earlier. What sort of community, within what sort of community am I identifying myself by choosing to watch this particular show? You follow? And if it's a community that I'm proud to be of, then the show is less likely to be problematic. But if the community of people that enjoy the show are not people that I'm, proud to be part of, so then it's probably not such a great show.
Saying if you're watching I don't even know, let's say a superhero movie, the community is billions of people.
Yeah, but they're not known. That's not
modestly dressed super women in the movie.
Yeah, but that's not satire. Yeah, correct. The truth is, which community? But let's say if you watch movies. So a lot of it is sort of which community. Who are the people that this is aimed at? Is it aimed at? Let's say when you watch a documentary or whatever, you're identifying within a different group of people. Yes.
So this is a bit of a, again, tangential but maybe relevant question. So for me, I'm taking a page from Hirsch. So for me, I really, really enjoy YouTube and going and looking on miscellaneous documentaries and stuff. And I'm not gonna lie, I do like my occasional Marvel movie or that. But if I'm looking at beyond me and myself down the line when I want to have a family, because I guess that's something we all kind of want, I don't think I want the influences that I had necessarily upon them. So, for example, I definitely would not get an Xbox or a PlayStation or anything like that, even if the games are I don't know, Wii Sports or something, because
I don't actually know what these things are, Baruch Hashem.
Okay, you would not get a video console even if, for instance, the video game
was
is
made for
interactive.
5-year-olds.
For tiny little children.
Is made for any age.
Exactly. So But like for me, it's still very hard to like give up the stuff because it's like, well, for you, I guess.
Yeah, I know, that's right. You have to be careful. I think your point is really, really
Like,
important.
I know it's bad, type of thing.
No, but it's not bad. You have to find, I think your point, if we go back to the boys playing football on a Friday morning, you have to find your healthy outlet. I think your point is excellent, and it's a very good point, worthwhile very much
would it be
to emphasize at the end.
In your estimation, kind of have like a dynamic of like, maybe I like to watch YouTube, but no YouTube for you, and like that kind of creates that like.
That's
family-
tricky. That's a bit tricky.
I know.
No, that is tricky to do that, but it's very hard for you now, but as Rat Hashem, at the right time, you'll become a father. And I think that what you do is, at this stage of your life, you navigate, what you need to do to unwind at this stage of your life.
Yeah.
And just like you'll find the right balance now, you pray to Hashem that when you move to the next stage of your life, you'll have the wisdom to make the right choices then as well.
Maybe I'll have too many kids to be too busy to watch.
Yeah, rather than saying, we're going to do this or to do that. You'll use your wisdom at that stage to know what the right thing to do is. But I think the balance is incredibly important. The power of free time to impact the rest of your life is huge. And I think there are a couple of red lines that we want to avoid. And I just want to emphasize them, and with that we'll come to the end of our discussion. You always have to think about within which community am I identifying by taking part in this activity. Now, I think that's a really helpful model within which to decide, is this good or is this a bad thing to do? So when I play table tennis, I'm not identifying with outrageous people. People around the world play table tennis for 1,000 different reasons. But if I enjoy boxing or if I enjoy a bullfight, so I'm identifying within a particular part of society, and I'm not proud of being part of that segment of society. You follow? I think that's a very helpful point number one. That is in terms of what to avoid. But I want to add on the other side, as we saw in the Shulchan Aruch, about the special games for Shabbat, about using the counters that were made out of wood, as the Mishnah Berurah says. The counters made out of wood, especially for Shabbat. That free time is an opportunity to strengthen ties with other people. It's an opportunity, if spent correctly, for a family to become closer to one another, for friendships to be built. That I shouldn't see free time as this scary time that I could, blow up my religious growth, but I should see it as a positive time. We looked at many sources that said, don't do this, don't do that, don't do the other. The Shulchan Aruch and the Mishnah Berurah were saying, no, it is permitted to play, to play games on Shabbat. Enjoy the schok, the fun of playing games on Shabbat. Enjoy the benefit of having, we work so hard all day, you come home exhausted. Utilize that precious time to unwind, to get closer to the people that you love, to build relationships, to learn a skill. There's so many opportunities to use free time as an opportunity for growth. Don't just see it as a time to avoid getting broken, but see it as an opportunity to build as well. Beseda, sweet, wonderful people, you should all be blessed with a wonderful, productive, free time evening from now. Lehitchaot. Bye-bye.
Shower and go to sleep.
Thank you so much. That is great.
In
Yishar Koch.
that order? Huh? In that order? First we'll do, what do we get?